How's it going, everybody? Wanted to make a video of a couple books that I've picked up recently and some things that I've been reading. I've been kind of reading intermittently lately. I've been trying to keep up with it, but things happen. Wait a minute. Almost forgot one of them. All right. So, a couple of these I have not started reading yet. A couple of them I have. Because you know me, like I've said in a couple of videos more than once, that I usually read like 50, 60 pages, maybe 100 pages of a book, and then I move on to another one. I always end up finishing those books that I started in the first place, but sometimes it's not straight through. I kind of come full circle. First one that I started reading it's just so easy to read. And at first it seems daunting, but it's Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin. I read the first book, I think 10 years ago, 2013. I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. I love the TV show, seen it many times. I'm currently going through YouTube reactions of people watching Game of Thrones for the first time, and it's just fun seeing key moments, people reacting to it, and just seeing the whole story unfold again, and seeing other people's interpretations of how the show has been going. This is one of the very rare instances where I'm glad that I watched the TV show first, and I'm glad I got into the TV show first, because one of the big, I'll call it a big problem with like epic fantasies with so many characters in it is that it's really hard for me to visualize characters with just names on a page. So when I watched Game of Thrones and I went through the whole show and saw it, I think I may have seen it multiple times before I started reading the book, or at least multiple times up until, however many seasons of the show were out at that point. I'm glad that I was able to put faces to names. It helps me remember characters and care about characters a little bit more, because I can kind of keep everything straight. Now, I know just from my own research that the books are, let's say, not night and day difference, but there are a lot of differences. Characters that were omitted from the show, characters that were in the show but the show carried them on a different trajectory than what the books originally planned for storytelling purposes. So I know that I'm in for a familiar tale, but a different one, and I'm kind of glad about that, because it's almost like reading a new story, or reading the same story just from a different perspective. I read this one about 10 years ago, and I'm about, I think as of last night, so I'm on page 242. And I mean, some novels are only 300 pages long. Each one of these books is 800 pages, 800 plus pages. And surprisingly, they're very easy to read. I think they're easier to read because I know I can follow along from just memory of the TV show and scenes and characters and how they interact with each other. But, sometimes reading epic fantasies can be pretty daunting, but surprisingly, Game of Thrones, once you start getting into it, if you're kind of familiar with it, it's easy. It's pretty easy to get into. This one I just bought the other day. It's called The Company of the Dead by David J. Kowalski. I love learning about the Titanic. I think the story itself has just gripped everybody just since its sinking. But this one is I don't know how it was at a used bookstore, and it was that I shop at, and it just happened to catch my eye based on the cover. It's almost like someone just put it on the shelf in the wrong spot, didn't even really bother. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because obviously, the ship itself is pretty, recognizable. But it's a sci-fi book. Can one man, in the back of the thing, can one man save the Titanic? A mysterious man appears aboard the Titanic on its doomed voyage, his mission to save the ship. The result of his efforts is a world where the United States never entered World War I, thus launching the secret history of the 20th century. So, at its core, it's about a guy who saves the Titanic from sinking, and the butterfly effect that happens, or that projects onto the rest of the world. So, it says time travel, airships, the Titanic, Roswell. Kowalski builds a decidedly original creature that blends military science fiction, conspiracy theory, alternate history, and even a dash of romance. That sounds pretty cool to me. Typically, I don't read historical fiction. I love fiction, but I like fiction where it's just a completely made-up world. And I like my fiction to be a little bit kind of supernatural, or a little bit of, a hint of magic, or something's kind of weird about the world that these people live in. So I think this one, I love the Titanic and I love learning about it. So I've kind of browsed through it, and a lot of the people that were like officers on the ship make like regular appearances as like main characters in this book. So sold me. One of the rare instances where I would probably read not exactly historical fiction, but like alternate historical fiction kind of thing. And what's really cool about this cover is that the top of it is like if the Titanic, if it had arrived in New York, and then the bottom of it is, obviously the Titanic with the iceberg next to it. So that one's a monster too. So we'll see how that goes. Golden Sun is book 2 by Pierce Brown, is the second book in the Red Rising trilogy. Now I think the new one just came out, a new book. I don't know anything about it. I don't want to look it up because I don't want to spoil anything, but originally it was a trilogy, and I think 2 more books were added after it. And then now this 6th book. So I have no idea if it follows, what's his name? Darrow. I don't know if it follows Darrow at all in his story, but Red Rising on my channel, I did a book review. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I really liked it. My one complaint is that I didn't expect the whole game part of it. If you've read it, the whole game that they're trying to, win to get like a sponsorship or an apprenticeship with the leader of these houses who own planets. I didn't expect it to be pretty much the entire book. I was expecting maybe a little bit more. Now that Darrow has gone into his apprenticeship with one of the leaders, one of the royal houses, kind of getting into the nitty gritty of everything. I still don't really understand, I guess, the point of having these giant military fleets in space. Like, everybody owns a planet and they're building up their militia and their armies, but like, I just don't see the point of like, maybe if you were fighting with another solar system. I know it's kind of like Game of Thrones, right? Where you've got royal houses that are always fighting each other. So I guess maybe you could relate it to that, where it's like each royal house is under, their own military, and they just want to have a military just in case they get attacked or whatever. But they're all underneath, like one central leader, not a king, but like compared to like a king in Game of Thrones. But I don't know. You can see more of a description in my Red Rising review. But Golden Sun, I'm really liking this one so far. This one's another really easy one to read. I love sci-fi, and this one does a really great job of just making it really accessible without being boring. This one I picked up recently. It's called Forever. I came across this one a long time ago, and I never actually read it, but I know I came across it, and I just happened across this one. It's kind of historical fiction as well. It takes place in the 1700s, mid 1700s. The only thing I'm really going to say about it is that the main character is granted immortality as long as he stays on the island of Manhattan. So like I said earlier, I like fiction when the world is a little bit strange and there's like a hint of maybe supernatural something existing somewhere. So obviously if he's granted immortality, someone maybe or something must have granted it to him. And that sounds like an interesting story to where he can live forever, but he can never really move on from the current situation that he's in. He has to watch everybody else move on with their lives. So is that a fair price to pay? Yeah, you live forever, but you can't go wherever you want. You can't experience whatever you want. You have to stay in one spot. So I kind of like those life choices of, do I stay here and stay forever and watch everybody else live their lives? Or do I trade that and get what everybody else has? This one, I'll just talk briefly about it. The Raw Shark texts. I'm a huge fan of Mark C. Danielewski and his weirdness that he writes in his books. This one was recommended by a lot of people in a Facebook group, House of Leaves Facebook group that I follow on Facebook. And a lot of people were saying that this book gives that kind of eerie, creepy vibe. Another one of those books that is just very strange to read. I just love weird books in general. So that's all I'll say about that. I don't really know anything about it, but I know enough people have said good things about it to where I don't even really need to read the back. So that one's cool. This one I've definitely started reading. Quantum Supremacy by Michio Kaku. I love learning about science and space, and Michio Kaku just makes every topic really accessible and easy to understand. I love watching interviews with him. I love watching TV shows, and I've read, I want to say 3 books by him. I think all 3 are on this channel as reviews. This is his newest one that came out in 2023, Quantum Supremacy, about quantum computers and how those are going to change the world. So right now we have binary, I don't know the exact word, but computers that run off of binary, ones and zeros, which is kind of slow, right? There's only 2 options. Either the information is a 1 or the information is a 0. So it computes off of like microchips and, transistors, like physical things, right? Quantum computers compute off of atoms. So that makes them infinitely more powerful than a regular ones and zeros computer, because atoms, if you know anything about science or heard anything about, electrons and just particles, right? Particles can be technically in more than one position at once. So it's not always either a 1 or a 0. It could be a 1 and a 0. So when you extrapolate that to how an atom can be positioned in its current state, it could be all positions and all positions at once, so that the computing power for each atom basically not infinitely increases the amount of computing power, maybe infinitely, but exponentially increases the amount of computing power compared to a regular computer. And the benefits of having that would be able to simulate, simulate a vaccine for something very quickly over computer. Like, would this vaccine work for this thing? Whereas like a regular computer might take, years to compute that with a bunch of different scenarios and whatever. These quantum computers can just cut the amount of computing time by a fraction of that, and you can get a lot more results quicker. So that's just one example of how these computers can be, used, but also the dangers of it, because if we have quantum computers and they're not all like regulated, maybe that sets up a lot of people for hacking, because regular password and like firewall security systems would not be able to hold back a quantum computer, because it could just exponentially try to break into your database. And so there's a whole dilemma about that, but it's really interesting to read so far. And then this last one I'll say is, I have not started reading this one yet, but Gleanings, which is kind of surprised. I didn't even know this was coming out. I mean, I got this one for Christmas, so I've had it for a while, by Neil Shusterman. If you guys have not read Scythe by Neil Shusterman yet, honestly, one of the best books that I've ever read. The sequels, books 2 and 3, it's a trilogy, a little strange. I think, in my opinion, I gave my opinions on it in my book reviews. It got a little away from like the original story and what I liked about the first book. But basically, in the future, humans have been engineered to not have any disease. They don't age. They do age, but you don't die of old age. Humans are basically born immortal. So how do you fix an overpopulation problem when everybody is born immortal? Well, you have scythes, name of the book, who have to choose who to kill in society. They have their reasons. They have a whole reasons of who they want to choose. People train to become scythes. Most people don't even want to go near them, don't want to make them mad because they basically have a license to kill people, right? So kind of the story follows these two characters who are training to become scythes. People don't really want to become scythes, but they kind of get chosen. Like, are you going to say no? So they're kind of forced to. But there's a whole hierarchy, which what really fascinated me about the book is that there's a whole hierarchy of almost like a government of they call it like the leader's called the high blade, and then you've got like the table and the almost like governors that it's really interesting. There's a whole hierarchy of leaders that kind of govern all of these scythes, and some scythes are more popular than others, almost like celebrities, and they take their jobs very seriously. They have to learn the art of like different weapons and not being cruel about, taking someone's life. I think there's one side that like never uses weapons. They make it painless for the person or something. I forget it. It was like 4 or 5 years ago that I read, but just one of the most unique worlds that I've come across. If you don't read the last 2 books, like books 2 and 3, Thunderhead and The Toll, totally fine. At least read Scythe, read the first one, because you can tell around the second book, halfway through the second book, I think Neil Shusterman wanted to write the book about this new character, and he focused on this other character rather than Citra and Rowan, I think their names were, who were the main characters in the first book. Anyway, I have all my opinions on that on my book reviews as well. But this one, it says Stories from the Arc of a Scythe, which is the name of that trilogy. So I think there's stories. There's a bunch of just like shorter stories within that world of, within that world, like I think maybe during that trilogy and then after the trilogy. So I'm interested in getting into that one because that one made a great first impression and ended with kind of an average impression on the way it ended. I gave book 1 a 5, book 2 a 4, and then book 3 a 3 out of 5. So it kind of went down in terms of quality, in my opinion. But I'm excited to jump into that one. So those are some of the things that I've kind of picked up lately and have been kind of, shuffling through like I usually do. So let me know what you guys have been reading lately, and I'll see you guys in the next, not book review video, but just video in general. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys later. Bye.